out there was done by the University of South Florida that was recently issued that found it to be highly successful. So we're really investing and making a lot of effort to do better and make sure that if somebody does something, that we get them in the right lane. And the right lane for people with mental health and co-occurring disorders is services, not the jail or the criminal justice system.
Thank you. I want to invite people, if you have questions, to put them in the Q&A on Zoom or in the comments on Facebook. This next question comes from the Democratic Socialists of America. They ask, what steps will you take to build trust between the sheriff's office and communities of color? Can you speak to any specific programs or instances you have already executed or proposed?
Well, yeah, there's several. I mean, one in particular, and I started this about 3 years ago. We have a deputy that's assigned specifically as a liaison to the minority communities of color. Some of you may know him, and he retired. The first person who occupied that position was Deputy John Patrick. John had that position and was out in the community. He associated with a lot of the faith-based community, a lot of the pastors, and was very active. We've invested in Men in the Making with Reverend Kenny Irby from the inception down there. And we have deputies that participate in that program, which is a fantastic program. And we have Captain Adrian Arnold and other deputies that participate in that. The deputy now that reaches out into minority communities and to people of color is Deputy William Lawson. And William's been very involved. So and through community policing and through other efforts we invest significantly in the kids with PAL, which is the Sheriff's Police Athletic League. It operates in Wellman to try and get to the families and trying to help these kids out especially. So we do outreach into the community and we also have into the Hispanic community. I have a lieutenant with the Hispanic Outreach Center in Clearwater that's a liaison up there. So we're actually doing quite a bit as far as outreach into the minority communities throughout Pinellas County.
Okay. This next question comes from Organized Florida. Will you deprioritize and slow eviction enforcement to give people facing eviction the best opportunity to keep their current homes or coordinate with community organizations to maintain dignity through the eviction process?
Yeah, you know, if I had control over it, I would. Is that the decision? So the eviction process is complicated. Really, what everybody's concerned about is not the filing of the eviction lawsuit. It's what's called the writ of possession, which is what happens at the last stage of the proceedings, because the writ of possession issued by the judge is what kicks somebody out of their house. So eviction proceedings take time, 6 months, a year, they go on for a period of time. There's a number of steps. And what really affects everybody is the last step, which is that writ of possession. And we've had judges in Pinellas County since COVID occurred and people lost jobs, et cetera. And some motions were made to these judges to stay the writs of possession, and the judges denied those motions. They said, no, Sheriff, you go serve it. And so when the judge says, here's a writ of possession and I'm ordering you to serve it, I don't have the legal authority to defy that court's order. And so if the judge stays it, and some have, but some have not, I'm happy not to do it. I'm glad not to. I see it. I get it. And it's something, though, that a lot of people think it's within my control. It's not, because it's that writ of possession. It's issued by a judge. And if the judge doesn't stay it, I'm obligated. I have no options but to serve it. So that's kind of the landscape with the evictions.
You do agree, though, that we are headed probably for a crisis. All these backlogged evictions that have been on hold through the pandemic, when that stay eventually ends, we're going to have a crisis on our hands.
Yeah, and what I would say is that what people need to do is to talk to the people involved in the eviction process, and again, it comes down to the judges. There are hundreds, and I would agree. Now, some of the evictions, and one of the things that everybody needs to know is that some of the evictions are related to the inability to financially pay. It has to do, they can't pay rent, they can't pay mortgages, or whatever that case may be. Some, though, are related to other things. Some are related to misconduct. Some are related to other factors. So one of the things to know what the underlying reason is for it. And if it's purely financial, I think that's the thing that gives people most concern. But I don't disagree that as we're seeing now, unfortunately, we're seeing an uptick again. And I don't know what the outcome is going to be as far as COVID is concerned. We were averaging about a 2% positives. Now we're up 6.5%, 7% positives. We were averaging about 15 to 20 cases a day, and now we're seeing 150 cases a day. And so where all this is going, and if I hope it doesn't, but if businesses shut back down again, it's just going to cause more financial hardship. So yes, I acknowledge that it is a problem, and it is going to cause financial hardships. But again, I have no authority on that, and it is purely over this period of time. It was brought to the chief judge, and somebody asked the chief judge if he would issue a blanket order to stay evictions, and he said he would not, that it needed to be decided by the individual judges. So again, this is played out, but I just have no authority over it. I get the writ, we got to do it. So it really is whether the judges want to stay them or whether the parties want to not request the court to issue the writ of possession and work with people who are truly having financial hardships.
I think we have a lot of questions about that. We'll be headed to those soon. If you have any questions on Zoom, please put them in the Q&A. If you're on Facebook, put them in the comments, and Jabbar will be getting to those shortly. Two more questions. A couple weeks ago, Sheriff, I sent you some screenshots from Deputy Doug Moore, who's a deputy of yours in the jail system. He was caught online saying, quote, "Most die at the hands of cops because they deserved it." Many people, and I would assume yourself, took offense at that statement. What would your response to that behavior be, and should this disqualify a deputy from their role?
Yeah, so I got that. We're looking into it, and I'll get back to you on it. We need to further investigate it. So, it's hard sometimes to take a sentence or two at first blush. I would agree with you. I can see the reason for the concern, but I really don't want to comment much more on it because it is something we're looking into and potentially would investigate formally. I haven't decided yet, but we are looking into it, and I'll get back to you on it.
I think you would agree that it's important for community members to report this stuff to you, because these things, if someone's willing to say that publicly online, imagine what they're willing to do privately, or when they're not, when they're in their role. And this particular deputy also had a prior complaint against him by an inmate where the deputy used the N-word several times, and that complaint is on file with you as well. So would you encourage community members to report incidents like this to you so that we can make sure that we have the best police and deputies possible doing this work?
Yeah, I encourage everybody to report anything they want. And I don't require that anybody identify themselves. You can make anonymous complaints. We look into everything. We publish on our website the disposition of all of our administrative investigation or internal affairs cases. We're transparent. We're open about it. If people have concerns, they need to report it. They should report it. I want them to report it so we can look at it. One of the most important things we can do is to take information from the public, react to it, be transparent about it, and look into things. So, yeah, absolutely. If somebody has a concern, they can contact us and let us know about it, and we will always look into it.
I think one more follow-up on this. For me, one thing I think the community wants for trust, especially in this moment where seems to be a real deficit of trust, is that when something is reported, that it's taken seriously. And so I know this has been a busy 2 weeks, right, for you to receive this complaint. But if I would hope that you would act as quickly as possible to make sure that someone like this couldn't potentially do any real harm or further harm, physical harm to someone if he's willing to speak these words. And so I implore you to, do whatever you need to do to make sure that people around this deputy are safe while you are looking into it.
I hear you.
Okay. And then last question. You've gone on the record before saying that racial profiling is incompatible with good policing, and that Pinellas County doesn't racially profile. You've said that before. if one of your officers were to state publicly that they believe someone was more likely to commit a crime because of their race, might that be a cause for them to lose their badge?
Of course, and that's, of course, you give me a hypothetical and you need to know all the facts, is that, could something happen if somebody, acted in a racially biased way, they made statements or they acted, sure, it's possible, but I can't comment on a hypothetical without knowing the facts. I can tell you that we don't tolerate it. We oppose it. It's wrong. I can tell you that last year, if you look at the statistics I put out in response to the 8 can't wait. And we put that out. And I hope that you and others had a chance to look at that. But you talk about complaints, and we receive complaints, and we do an annual report on biased policing and complaints. I think we had about 400,000 calls last year. I think it was like 435,000 calls. Is that we had one bias-based policing complaint. So it's the message is clear here that we're not going to tolerate it. No, we don't. And we will take action against anybody who engages in that. There's no place for it. So if somebody engages in it, we'll look at it and we'll take the appropriate action.
So your words in a May of 2019 Tampa Bay Times article, you said, quote, "Are there more people of certain races or national origins that are criminally justice involved than others? Yes. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Is it because the policies of the laws or the system are unfair to them, or are they more involved in it for other reasons? I tend to believe it's for other reasons." How do you reconcile those two things?
Yeah, so the other reasons are, and I think a lot of this, unfortunately goes back, it's especially with the kids and the environment, is socioeconomic. I think it's the same reasons why when you go back to the Tampa Bay Times series, on the schools, and the problems and all the disparity in the schools. Remember that article from a couple of years ago. I think it goes back. I think those other reasons are that it's socioeconomic. And there's no question in lower socioeconomic areas, you do have more people of color traditionally, and you have more crime in those areas, and you have kids that are committing crime. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. This is the problem we have with the car thefts and the burglaries is that kids are sitting at home. They have a parent. There's no food in the refrigerator. They don't have anything. It's Friday night. And they're sitting there and they're saying, I'm going to go do something. So they go toe tag and they go commit crimes and they go do those things. So I think that at its root, I think it's driven by socioeconomic factors.
So, but you see how that quote, do you see how that quote could be perceived as you having racial bias in your work as sheriff?
No, because, again, I can't control, everything that the media prints or doesn't print. I mean, there's so many things that I say and they have so much room, and some of it's sound bites and, the context of it. And so, I guess to answer your question, okay, is the way you phrase the question and where you stopped it. And I don't have the article in front of me. And if that's where it stopped, do I see where that could be construed in a certain way? Sure, based on your question, Andy, and the way you phrased it. But I can tell you what I was talking about at the time is exactly what I just told you, and that those other things are socioeconomic.
It was in the long profile of you in May 2019 by Catherine Varn, who's an excellent journalist. And I would think that if it were me and I had a quote out there like that misconstrued my intentions and bias, I would retract it immediately. So that may be something you want to consider doing, because I think it's been perceived as many as you implying that people of specific races are more prone to criminal action.
No, that's not it. It's totally in the context of, and it's totally socioeconomic, and I think that is a significant cause of a lot of these issues.
I am going to pass it off to Jabbar, who has questions. Many of you have made questions in the Q&A and on Facebook. And Sheriff, I thank you for answering the questions that I brought to you on behalf of the organizations. Jabbar?
Oh, thank you, Andy. Sheriff, we got questions on the Zoom and in the Facebook chat. And before I get started, I just wanted to make a comment on your last statement. Talk about social economic problems, you have to talk about the systematic oppression that made them. and we have to get to the root of the problem to really start making some corrections. So I just want to make that statement. The first question comes in, and it says on Tuesday, you were in DC supporting Trump when he signed his CJ executive order. Are you trying your campaign for sheriff? Are you tying your campaign for sheriff to Trump's leadership?
Yeah, I was in Washington yesterday because the President of the United States issued an executive order on law enforcement reform. I was there. He was acting in his official capacity. I was acting in my official capacity as a sheriff, as the president of the Florida Sheriff's Association, as a board member of the Major County Sheriffs of America. And the things that are in that executive order are good things. They're a good start to making some necessary and positive changes. So I was there to support the beginning steps, and I was in a meeting with President Trump, with Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, and also a pre-meeting with a lot of family members who had their loved ones that had been involved in situations where they lost their life at the hands of law enforcement, and the president and Senator Scott and those of us in law enforcement leadership positions heard those people and listened to them. And that was the purpose of being there. You all remember that Dallas cop, Amber Geiger, who shot Mr. Jean.
Yeah.
I sat next to his sister yesterday, and I didn't even have any words for her. I heard her story. I heard her concern. She is emotional, and to hear all of that and what these families are going through. So I was there to listen to them and to support what is a good first step in making some changes that are necessary in law enforcement.
All right. And just to kind of tie to that executive order, do you have any policy recommendations or changes at Pinellas County on your level that you could be making at this time? And that's my question. That didn't come out. That's just my question.
Yeah, and we are, I don't know, Javar, if you had a chance to look at the response that I put out to the 8 Can't Wait. One of the things that we've required for years is that if a deputy sees somebody engaged in another deputy engaged in a violation of law or policy, that they were required to report it to their supervisor and or to internal affairs. I think there are other places in our policies where you could read that they also had to act to stop it. But we're going to change our policy to be explicit with that, where it says if you see a deputy acting contrary to law or policy, you have an obligation to intervene and to take affirmative action to make it stop immediately. We're also going to add in to make it clear that as long as it's not a threat to the law enforcement officer himself, before you use deadly force, you should verbalize and you should try and gain compliance. So we're making some changes that I would call it more tweaks. Most of everything that was in the 8 Can't Wait, we already do. We ban chokeholds, we ban shooting at vehicles. We have extensive reporting practices and policies, but we're going to continue to look at things to try and do it better. We can always look to improve, and there's a lot of areas where we can. One of the things it's just not right is that I participated for the last 4 years with the FBI's national use of force reporting. I'm a big proponent that every law enforcement agency should be reporting the use of force. But you know what? Is that a lot of agencies are not. And I spearheaded that. I sat on that working group for 4 years, and only 40% of the law enforcement agencies in the United States are participating in it. So those are things we do, and we contribute data to it because it should be out there. But there's a lot of things that we need to do as a profession that where we can make some improvements.
All right, and I hope we can sit down and make some of those changes and have some input. So the third question from off the internet, a recent local ABC article brought to light that nonviolent protesters were being held overnight with their bail being raised from $250 to $1,000. You requested to change the policy by Judge Rondinlo, and then told the media that there were violent protesters when in fact the vast majority were peaceful. And they asked, why should we trust you to serve?
So here's what happened with that is that 2 weeks ago, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, as people were protesting in St. Petersburg. And I have absolutely nothing but support for the right to protest and say whatever you want, do whatever you want, go wherever you want, no issue. But you can't throw rocks, can't throw bottles, can't throw bricks, can't bring ground glass in buckets and toss it at us. And so what happened down there in St. Petersburg, and I was there, is that the police started to get attacked and people were throwing stuff at us. It wasn't until that time, and we got to be clear about this, we got to be straight about it. It wasn't until that time when there was violent acts toward the police that then, and only then, was it declared an unlawful assembly. It was never declared an unlawful assembly when people were blocking intersections, when people were taking up the streets, when people were protesting, when people were verbalizing. No, okay, we let all that stuff go. That's fine. That's everybody's right to protest. But when it turned violent, we said it's an unlawful assembly. At that point, and I saw the stopwatches that were being operated, people were given at least 5 minutes and said, you have 5 minutes to disperse. If you don't disperse within that 5 minutes, then you are subject to arrest. And people didn't disperse. And what people did was, in some cases, and I saw this with my own eyes, people stood up as they were laying down or sitting down, and they came toward the barricades. They came toward us. So as opposed to doing what they're told to do, and the rocks and the bottles and everything else kept coming. The only people where we made arrests were after there were violent acts and after people had been told to disperse pursuant to a lawful order as an unlawful assembly, and they didn't disperse. And that's the reason why, because those people were in that crowd, in that melee, where I followed what's under the administrative order, and I asked the judge, because I don't want those people coming back and re-engaging, okay, in those violent acts. So this has nothing to do with people who are protesting peacefully. These are people who are involved in the melee, where we were getting pelted with rocks, bottles, bricks, broken glass, firework, mortar rounds, and all kinds of other stuff. That's what happened down there.
So let's just get back to the middle of the question when they asked that nonviolent protesters were being held overnight in jail when their bail being raised from $250 to $1,000.
That's right. They weren't nonviolent protesters. These were people that were involved in the melee. These were people that were in the middle of the rock, bottle, glass throwing who didn't leave when they were told to leave. They were in the middle of all of that. Those are the people that were arrested.
All right. To the next question. Hillsborough County has declined to prosecute 67 protesters charged recently. Will Pinellas County consider following that path?
That's not my decision. That's a decision for the state attorney, and he can make whatever decision he wants. We have a job to do, and the state attorney has a job to do. That's really a question for the state attorney, because that's totally his. It's not my decision.
Okay, could your office make a recommendation or something to the state attorney?
Well, if the state attorney called me and asked me for my position on it, I would consider it. I don't know what it would be at this time. I can tell you that some cases I would oppose, like the guy that had the 9mm stuck in his waistband and an AK-47 in his car. No, I don't think that case should be dismissed. The guy that had the can of gasoline with the bricks and the pipes and all that other stuff, no, I don't think that case should be dismissed. So I'd have to look at them on an individual basis. But if the state attorney asked my view, I would, on an individual case, I would give him if he asked. But it's his decision, not mine.
Yeah, that question a little close to my heart, because I'll be out there demonstrating. I don't like to be called a protester. I'm demonstrating with the demonstrators. So I really am close to that, and I think it should be looked at. So the next one. Why does Sheriff Bartieri not want to share the stage with the other candidates?
Well, with Mr. McLennis, I won't, because it turns into a circus. Mr. McLennis makes stuff up, doesn't tell the truth, and he posts pictures. And go look at his Facebook page. He's got imposed and photoshopped pictures of me in Ku Klux Klan garb and Hitler garb, of having an African-American girl that I'm supposedly pulling down the street, pulling her by her hair. And that's just wrong. And he makes stuff up, and he engages in inflammatory conduct like that. And I'm not going to make a circus out of an election. So I won't appear with him as long as he engages in that, what I consider to be reprehensible conduct.
Okay, next question. How are you measuring the success of the trust building and outreach within communities of color?
Well, I have a lot of good relationships with a lot of people. I think that we, again, I talked about it earlier in response to Reverend Oliver's questions about what we're doing with outreach. And I get a lot of good responses. And I think we do have trust with a number of people, a number of organizations. And I base it on the feedback. And I base it also on the complaints that we get or what we don't get. When you have over 400,000 calls in a year, and you only have one bias-based policing complaint, I think that speaks volumes. That tells you something right there. But we also, get out into the community and I talk to people. And so I guess how I would judge it is based upon the complaints, based upon what people are telling us and the relationships we have is how I would base it. But that doesn't mean that we don't have room to do more and do better. We do. And I'm certainly willing to engage in that.
Okay, and I'm glad that you're willing to engage, because I want to say one thing about only having one complaint, and that may be the way the complaint structure is set up. So that could be telling you two different things. It could be telling you, one, that you're doing a great job, or two, that the communication isn't there, and the people who would or may want to complain may not feel they have the space to. So that's just two ways to look at it.
Jabbar, but I don't know what more we can do is that people can make anonymous complaints off of our website. They can call numbers that we have. They can come in. I mean, we have every available medium for people to contact us and make complaints. So, I mean, it's out there. And if people want to do it, they can send stuff in by mail, and they do. People use all of those forums that we have, and we make it very easy for people to contact us, again, anonymously, or if they want to identify themselves. So, we're pretty, on top of it and on time with giving people all the different forums to report whatever they want.
Sheriff Gualtieri, I'm sorry, Jabbar, jump in real quick. Would you consider, you're on the media a lot, you're on the TV a lot. Would you consider going on TV and asking people if they have experienced, this type of behavior by your deputies to make the complaint and explain how they can make the complaint, because you want to know so that you can, get rid of these bad actors in our police force?
I don't know that it's appropriate to what do we got to do? Do a public service announcement and say, come make a complaint on the cops? I don't know that that's appropriate or necessary. I think people know if somebody asks, like in this, I've said it all along is that, and I'm sincere about it. People who have issues, have concerns, have complaints, is that they are in, as people email me directly all the time. And I get those complaints directly. So what it tells me is people do know how to make the complaints. Getting back to your comment and to Jabbar's, we get a fair number of complaints. I get them directly from people. So it's not like it's some dearth of complaints. We get them, and I think people do know how to complain. But
you said there was only one?
No, but that is bias-based policing. I mean, we get complaints where, in other words, where somebody says, "No, we got a ton of complaints," okay, but bias-based, where it was race-based.
Gotcha. Okay, I
when I say one, I'm talking about bias-based.
I gotcha. I, for what it's worth, I personally think a PSA from you would go a long way to instill some trust. Back to you, Jabbar.
Yeah, Reverend Andy, I agree. A PSA will be good. So we're going to get right back into the next question because we got to look at the time. When will the sheriffs that's under your control or in your charge get body cameras?
Well, we have no plans to implement body cameras. You look at the number over in Hillsborough right now, they just said they were going to go to them, and they're spending $14 million on body cameras. One of the things that we have here that no other agency has, including other police departments in Pinellas County, is every single cruiser has a dash cam. Every deputy is equipped with a mic pack. We got a lot of video. We got a lot of audio recordings. I don't think that body cameras solve all problems. In fact, they can cause more problems. Look at Minneapolis. You know what they had in Minneapolis? They had body cameras. They had citizen review boards. They had all the bells and whistles. I'll tell you what's more important than any of that, and that's agency culture. And that's the people who work there know that you're accountable, and we're going to treat you right and fairly, but we're also going to treat the community right and fairly. And if you mess up, we're going to hold you accountable. Look at my record on that. And that's more important than anything else. And especially in these times, an agency our size, look at Hillsborough, they're spending $14 million. And you got privacy interests. You have, if these things are running all the time, is that some cops coming into your house and they're recording everything in your house. People don't want that. And these things they're not the magic wand. They don't solve everything. I have no problem in recording. I have no problem in video. And people video a lot. Look at all the cameras out there and all the phones that are out there. And we equip every car with a dash camera. One of the things, I know St. Pete is piloting a I guess I call it a limited body camera system where it activates when the gun is taken out of the holster. I'm interested to see what the outcome is of that. If that's something, I might give some thought to, but a full blown all the time, 24/7 recording where you're spending $14 million on body cameras, I don't think the bang's worth the buck. I don't think it's a good return on the investment.
I'm really for body cameras, full-time running body cameras. And I've actually spoken with the chief about it. And quite like you said, they're testing the limited cameras now. And like I told him, this is his chance to lead, to lead with full real body cameras. I know it does pose some concerns, but I think there's municipalities that have figured it out, right? We have areas here in Florida that have full-time running body cameras and they have figured those same issues out. So I really hope that you guys can get together and figure it out, because I think body cameras will prevent a lot of unnecessary false allegations that do go on. So I'm going to move straight on to the next question. Many people would like to see money from public safety budget shifted away from departments. Can the sheriff break down, to the best of your knowledge, what the budget allocated for the department is used for?
Yeah, sure. Go absolutely. Go take a look at our website. We post our budget in detail on the website, and you can see exactly where everything is spent. We post it every year, and you can look at it out there. So it's all public, and anybody can go to our website and take a look at it and where we spend money. One of the things that I welcome, in 2010, we opened Pinellas Safe Harbor, which is a jail diversion program for the homeless, so that we don't book them into the jail and we don't criminalize homelessness, and we keep people out of the criminal justice system. And the average daily population of Pinellas Safe Harbor until COVID was about 400 people a day. And out of the sheriff's office budget, we're spending about $2.3 million a year to run Safe Harbor, and that is to provide the homeless services and counseling and life skills and drug treatment and reading literacy, et cetera, to try and help these people. And I guess ask the question, should the sheriff's office be doing that? Is that somebody else's responsibility, or should law enforcement? I don't know of any other law enforcement agency in the country that operates a homeless shelter like we do. In fact, I know it doesn't exist. We do a lot. Should we have a mental health unit? Should the have licensed clinical social workers or licensed mental health counselors where we're doing case management, or should somebody else do it? We engage in it because there's holes and there's voids, and we're the ones that are getting called. One of the things that was in President Trump's order yesterday was a direction to the Attorney General to provide money and provide grants to agencies that could take some of these things away from the responsibility of law enforcement agencies and put them in the right wheelhouse, put them in the lane that they belong in. So, I welcome some of that and some of that opportunity. I've said to the providers in Pinellas County for years, if any of you want to step up and come run Pinellas Safe Harbor and pay for it and keep those 400 people who are homeless out of the jail, out of the criminal justice system, bring it on. Come on, let's go. Yeah, you know how many have stepped up? Oh, that would be zero. So we continue to do it. So, it's a reality that we do have stuff where we are engaging in a lot of social service function that others could do. And if people want to step up and do it, I'm all about it.
All right. And we did talk about that before, that like a lot of things that you guys doing needs better publicity, right?
Yeah.
When we're in that meeting, a lot of the things we were asking for are already being done, but people don't know. So it will go along.
And I think we need to do that. I think I had a brief, quick discussion with Brother John Muhammad down there at St. Pete last week about this. we were talking, briefly. I think we should sit down and talk about some of these things. I think you all be surprised and shocked to hear and know about some of the things that we are doing out there that are really good things, that are sensitive to the community and trying to help people out. And this is not all about, lock them up. And, some people craft that narrative, but that narrative is just wrong. And people tag us with like bookings at the jail. Some people will say, oh, there's, X number of, drug arrests at the jail because X number of people were booked. That's not us. Some of that, we run the jail, but that doesn't mean everybody booked in there comes from us. So there's a lot of good stuff that's being done. And, one of the other things we do is take a guess. I'll say this rhetorically, is that we run in the whole region, the largest ROR, release on recognizance, alternative sentencing program in the area. There are other counties that don't do it at all. We supervise right now 1,500 people that are out without having to post bond, no bail. They're out on their signature and their promise to appear for court so they can get out, so they can be with their families, so they can work and be productive while they're waiting for their court case to get disposed of. Other counties like Pasco, others, they don't run any of those programs. We have a robust program where we supervise 1,500 people, where the judge says, because the sheriff is willing to supervise you, I'll let you out without having to post any bond. We have a bond program where it's a hybrid, where the judges will lower the bond amount and we put people on electronic monitoring that gets them out. So as opposed to having a $10,000 bond, they have a $5,000 bond in electronic monitoring. There's so much being done, and I welcome the opportunity, if you all want, sit down and have some discussions about it, because there's more being done than what you think there is.
Yeah, and it does sound like a lot of the stuff that's talking about, from bail reform to defund, that it may not be the terminology that you would prefer to use, but you're already doing some of it. And the people are asking to make it more robust, and make it bigger and more impactful. Because all right. So next question. So we keep moving. What is the process and response when undocumented person is pulled over and has no driver's license?
So if anybody's pulled over and they have no driver's license, the officer has a couple of choices. One, they could do nothing. They could issue a ticket, or the officer could arrest somebody. So it's within the officer's discretion as to what they do with it. It has nothing to do with their immigration status. It has to do with whether they have a driver's license. And we don't ask people because what their immigration status is, because it has no bearing. We can't even go to the computer. We can't even check. We have no access to the ICE database. We don't enforce immigration law. That is purely the federal government's responsibility. So I know it's hard for people to get their arms around it, but local law enforcement has no place in immigration enforcement.
All right, next question. And my thought was like, dang, discretion, that's kind of scary, because if they have a bias, then they can execute their bias. So I don't know, that's a different conversation, but that's my first thought when you said, okay, it's up to the officer's discretion. I was like, so if the officer has a bias, he can execute his bias because he has discretion. All right, but next question. Black people in Pinellas and Hillsborough are at least 6 times as likely to be arrested for marijuana possession as white. Please explain why you think this is.
I don't know, because we don't arrest people generally on marijuana possession. If it's in conjunction with another charge, perhaps like a felony, something like that. But go look at the adult pre-arrest diversion program. One of those first questions I got asked about, keeping people out and not having criminal records. Go look at the report. It's posted on our website. And the number one offense that we divert people for and keep them out of the jail for is possession of marijuana and possession of paraphernalia. So, and look at it's all broken down on that report too, by race and by gender, and there's all kinds of other demographics of the people that are diverted that are on that report. So I'd ask people to go take a look at it.
Okay, this next question, I think you had already answered it, but I'm going to just say it again so you can still make a comment. Can we expect Pinellas County law enforcement agencies to opt into the forthcoming federal database mentioned by the president in his executive order?
Well, I tell you, I absolutely 100% would, and I do. Remember I said before is that I spearheaded the national law enforcement use of force database and served on that task force that developed it. This next database that the president talked about yesterday is a database where it would be for the bad apples. It would be for officers who have substantiated complaints, sustained complaints for excessive force. I wholeheartedly support it. I can't make other agencies do it. I have no control over the city police departments, but I can tell you that we'd be in with both feet on that.
So this is a COVID-related question. Is all sheriffs required to wear a mask while on duty, interacting with colleagues and also non-officers?
They can wear masks, okay, and socially distance. If they're in the car by themselves, of course, that's not necessary, and it's within their discretion. Whether
I'm about 5 minutes away from being on the internet.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
See you.
So yeah, so you say it's up to them, and if they're in their car, but there is no policy that forces them to make it. I mean, where?
No, in the jail they have to, because we've had problems in the jail. In the community, in some places within the sheriff's office there are, but for the patrol deputies, no.
Okay. And final question from the queue. The deputies were caught on tape pinning down with knee on neck a 14-year-old black boy just days ago. Can you please explain?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the case, but I'm aware. I think I'm aware of the general incident, and that is in internal affairs right now. It's being investigated, so by law, I can't talk about it.
All right. Thank y'all for these tough questions. And I want to pass it back to you, Reverend Andy.
Yep. Thank you, Sheriff Gualtieri, for coming and being on with us this hour. Thank you to everyone who asked those great questions and to our orgs. And I'm looking forward to that PSA. But thank you for being on here to share your thoughts with us.
So yeah, no problem. And I'm going to leave you with this: is that Brother John, when I met with him, I said it to Jabbar now. It also works both ways. You always have my number. You know how to contact me. You all want to sit down and have a discussion. Reach out. Okay. It's not all about me just reaching out to you guys. Is that you're more than welcome. And you guys want to sit down and have a cup of coffee or whatever. We can sit down and have some meaningful discussion about things, and I would welcome the opportunity if you all want to do it.
I will take you up on that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Have a good night.
Yep. Bye.
Okay, we are going to continue with our forum, and we're going to give the opportunity for our organizations to introduce themselves. The organizations that help make this possible, they're going to share with attendees about your work and how it relates to the sheriff election. Each organization will have 1 minute. And if I can get whoever's running tech to change the screen so that we can see the different orgs speak. I'm first going to ask the Southern Poverty Law Center. AJ is going to share with us.
Hi, good evening. So the Southern Poverty Law Center's Action Fund is a 501c4 organization that advances the work of our sister organization, the Southern Poverty Law Center, by engaging in legislative action and supporting critical ballot initiatives. And some of that work includes engaging and mobilizing voters in the local elections that impact our daily lives, seeking to reform the criminal justice system so it operates fairly and equitably, challenging the use of local law enforcement to enhance federal immigration enforcement efforts and the sheriff's role as the first stop in the deportation pipeline, and also pushing to eliminate exclusionary policies such as unnecessary suspensions and school-based arrests of children that can cut short a child's education. And we hope that today's forum provides more information on the sheriff's role as an official who you elect to serve your community.
Great, thank you so much. And in just a moment, we are going to hear from our next two sheriff candidates. But first, I want to give the opportunity for Pamela from Florida Immigrant Coalition to share with us.
Hi, everyone. So for Flick Votes, we seek to expand democracy by shaping an active and new electorate that's conscious, that reflects the diversity of Florida, but also while encouraging those that can't yet vote, to also be part of this new system. So we want the equal and fair treatment of all people, including immigrants and refugees.
Thank you, Camilla. Next, with Organized Florida, Brother John.
Yes, so thank you, Pastor Andy. Organized Florida is a community-based nonprofit member organization comprised of low and moderate income people dedicated to the principles of social, racial, and economic justice, as well as the promotion of equal and fair treatment for all Floridians. Our focus primarily is on base building and building power from the inside out, relying on those who are directly impacted in the community by the issues that we address, providing leadership development opportunities, and increasing our ladder of engagement to really empower our communities to be able to advocate and promote change from the inside. Also, we focus on electing champions who share our vision and our values, and also work to advocate for policy changes as well as institutional practice changes that negatively impact low to moderate and people of color.
Thank you, Brother John. Next, Faith in Florida, Nancy.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. Faith in Florida Action Fund is a 501c4 that works with different faith traditions, different congregations across the state of Florida. We work to make sure that people who are often forgotten during election time, that are not normally contacted, low propensity voters, people from all racial backgrounds, but specifically Black and Brown people, are aware of the races that are happening in their communities, that are aware of the different roles of different positions that influence and can criminalize further their communities. We want to make sure that they are aware who are the people that they can hold accountable by educating them around the different roles of races like the sheriff, like the state attorney, and also work with them to build and empower them so that they can hold these folks accountable across the entire state of Florida.
Thank you, Nancy. Next, we have the Democratic Socialists of America, Kofi.
So the Democratic Socialists of America is the largest socialist organization in the United States. We believe that working people should run both the economy and socially, and should run both the economy and society democratically to meet human needs, not to make profits for a few. We are a political and activist-based organization, not a party. We canvass a community-based chapters, yes, they use a variety of tactics from legislative direct action to fight for reform that empower working people.
Thank you, Kofi. And last but not least, with Dream Defenders, Jason.
Hello. The Dream Defenders is a multiracial working class youth-based organization founded in 2012 as a response to the murder of Trayvon Martin. Over the years, our work has taken many forms, but central to it is a commitment to justice and freedom for all Floridians, especially Black and Brown youth who have only experienced a facsimile of it. Locally, much of our efforts have been focused on ending the school-to-prison pipeline in Pinellas, while also pursuing restorative and transformative justice as an alternative to our current retributive and punitive system. We ask you this today, can we dream together? And more importantly, can we work to build the world of our hopes and dreams, rather than accepting that violence, death, and tragedy are unavoidable consequences of policing in America? Text DREAM DEFEND to 484848 for more information.
And thank you so much. We are now going to allow our next two candidates for sheriff to introduce themselves. Want to give the honor first to McLennan. Since your name was invoked in the last portion of the debate, I think it's only fair for you to go first. You each have 2 minutes.
Hey, my name is James McGlinnis. I'm running for Sheriff of Pinellas County. I've spent the last 10 years investigating corruption at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department and all of the things that are wrong and how they impact our community here in Pinellas. I just listened to Sheriff Galtieri say so many things that weren't true that it really would take me at least an hour to respond to those things. But what he's doing there at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department is not what he's saying he's doing and not what he's actually doing in real life. And the people that live here in Pinellas know that. And I'm here to make a change. And I firmly believe that we can't change the culture of the police industry as long as we have people like Sheriff Galtieri in those positions. He is a dyed-in-the-wool police officer, career officer, and he's going to keep protecting the officers and protecting what they do. And I'm a non-law enforcement officer. I've come here because I think that non-law enforcement officers are the face of police reform. And we as the people need to understand that we have the right to elect a non-law enforcement officer as sheriff in order to implement all of the reforms that we all want. I just heard all of these moderators asking, begging, pleading with Sheriff Galtieri to do these things that they're asking for. And he's throwing out little token half measures and claiming that he's done this or he's done that. Like, for instance, community policing. And then he goes and he says that we've had one community police officer. One. I'm sorry, that just doesn't cut it. I'm here to actually make a difference. I'm here to make massive changes. And all of my changes are on my platform page, mcglinnisforsheriff.com, if you'd like to see what I'm actually going to do rather than listen to what Galtieri claims he's doing.
Thank you very much. And next, Mr. Santana. You're muted.
There we go. Yes, my name is Eliseo Santana, and I've been in Pinellas County since 1980. Just after I got out of the U.S. Army, I served 4 years serving our nation. Came on board and started back in 1981. I was hired as the first non-white technician for the Sheriff's Department. And let me tell you that it was a learning experience, because at the time, the acting chief deputy, on my first day of being employed, the first day I had to go before him, he sat me down in his office and he says, "You know, Santana, you're not a good fit. We don't want you here, but I had to hire you because you had the highest score. So keep your nose clean and we'll take care of you." And that was the beginning of that career. And let me tell you that culture has not changed. It's a little bit more subdued, but institutionally it carries on. And it's important for us to have a non-law enforcement individual that is aware of the culture because of having been within it and participated in keeping our community safe through the use of technology, to be able to address these issues. And I have to agree with what the sheriff has said before, that culture is the absolute. You can change rules and regulations, procedures, and implement programs, but unless you have the person on the top truly grasp the need to change the culture, then we're not going to have that systematic change that we need to eliminate that system that feeds on itself.
Okay, thank you very much. Jabbar is going to explain the rules of engagement. Oh, Jabbar's not here. I will explain the rules of engagement.
All right.
Each of you will have your video and audio turned on. You can use this is for our attendees. Attendees have your video and audio turned off. You can use the chat box for conversation and use the Q&A feature to propose questions. For those of you watching on Facebook Live, we ask for your participation to put questions in the chat. And candidates, you will want to keep your answers to 2 minutes. We have a timekeeper who will cut you off, and give direct and clear responses, please. Candidates can have 1 minute for rebuttal if you are named in your opponent's answer. So we will start with Mr. Santana. This question is from the Dream Defenders. We'll give you this first question. There are programs that exist across the United States, such as the LEAD program, that allows for the option of immediate diversion when calls involving drugs are involved instead of arresting people. Will you work with community groups to create or advocate for pre-booking diversion programs that divert people from the criminal justice system before charges are filed?
Absolutely. This is part of changing the culture. You know, as long as we have somebody that is in charge, that is militaristic and using force in order to change behavior, you're not going to truly get to where the core of the actions are. We need to get the community agencies involved to be able to address these underlying issues and resolve them before people come to having committed a crime and come before us. Absolutely.
McLennis?
I think Sheriff Galtieri's position on APAD is a false flag. And the reason I say that is the whole purpose is not to criminalize people. And with his APAD program, he's still doing pre-contextual stops, meaning his officers don't like the way that car looks. He's still going to pull those people over. He's still going to search their car unconstitutionally, and he's still going to find something to arrest them for. Then he drags them down to the jail. And do you really think it matters that much whether they're made to pay all kinds of money through the diversion program, pay for bracelets, go to community service, when literally they shouldn't have never been arrested in the first place? Galtieri himself a few years ago said that 38% of his arrests are for cannabis and marijuana and personal use drugs. And handcuffs have never cured addiction, ever. So as sheriff, I'm going to end all cannabis enforcement. We're going to stop pulling people over. We're going to stop searching their car. And we're going to stop trying to criminalize every single person in Pinellas County so that they don't even go into the system in the first place. Mass incarceration starts with handcuffs. The police are the ones that start the mass incarceration. And the way they stop, and the way you stop mass incarceration, is stop putting handcuffs on so many people for victimless crimes, for minor like traffic violations, for not having certain paperwork, for whatever other reasons, open container, trespass. They arrest so many homeless people a day. He is literally arresting, according to himself, about 130 to 140 people a day. And recently he said that we're going to start using notices to appear because of the COVID outbreak. And so he said, now with the notices to appear, we've got it down to 30 arrests a day, which means that he is arresting 100 people a day that he never needed to arrest in the first place, just to put inside the system. And I say, the heck with APAD. I say, don't put the handcuffs on in the first place. Let's go back to just using police force for what it's supposed to be, which is enforcing actual crimes with real victims.
All right. Your next question from Flick. We'll stay with McLennis. What commitments, if any, do you plan to make to the undocumented community to keep them safe?
Well, the first commitment that I would make to the undocumented community is that if I am sheriff, you're not going to have to be worried about getting pulled over for, like we just said, a pretextual stop where they're just going to arrest you because they don't like the way you look. I listened to what Galtieri said about all that, and he said, no, they don't have to worry about what's going on, but they do. If they're out driving, if they're out in the community, they are getting profiled and they are getting pulled over by Pinellas County deputies on a regular basis. And they're the ones, the minority communities are the ones that are facing the brunt of this. Sheriff Galtieri was asked, how come minorities are being arrested 6 times more than white people for drugs when white people and black people and Hispanic people all use drugs at about the same level, at about 10%. But here in Pinellas County, they're arrested 6 times more. Now, he was asked that exact same question 4 years ago in the exact same context. And he said, well, I didn't know that was happening. I'll have to look into that. Here it is 4 years later. You're asking him the exact same question. He still hasn't done a damn thing about looking into it. And that's the problem. We've got a sheriff that does not belong in office anymore. He is like he's like the rebel flag of sheriffs, and it's time for him to be taken down.
That is an image. Mr. Santana.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yes, of course. This is from Flick. What commitments, if any, do you plan to make to the undocumented community to keep them safe?
Wow. The same commitment that I make to every individual that resides within this county. We're going to be fair in our application. Look, when you use fear to try and keep the crime rate down, when you use fear to prevent somebody that has just had a crime committed to them and needs that assistance, when you do all of these things, you're festering. Crime doesn't occur in a bubble. If somebody is being strong-arm robbed and they're undocumented because they carry so much cash and they don't have the ability of putting it into banks and that type of thing, and so they're a very likely target, that individual needs to be addressed, not the victim, but the individual that's committing that crime has to be addressed. And I will eliminate any kind of issues coming with the undocumented fearing that. And let me tell you another thing. When an individual goes to the jail, apprehended, not necessarily arrested, and their fingerprint is given, is an automatic warrant issue for their arrest if they're undocumented. It's like a given. And so we need to stop that action and say, oh, it's not up to me. Yes, it is.
Thank you for that answer. We'll stay with you. And before the next question, I want to remind you that if you have questions for either candidate, to please, if you're on Zoom, put it in the Q&A. And if you're on Facebook, drop it in the comments. Our next question comes from the Democratic Socialists of America. What steps will you take to build trust between the Sheriff's Office and communities of color? Can you speak to any specific programs or instances you have already executed or proposed?
Look at me. Just look at me. The fact that I'm in that position means that things are going to change, because, you know, it's one thing to read about an experience. It's another one to experience it. When I was told at the beginning of working for the sheriff that I was, the attitude that they took toward me institutionally, I live this prejudice that is happening in our society. My grandchildren go through that. Look, I can tell you everything that I will do, but the reality is that because of who I am, things will be done to change that culture and make things better for everybody. We will apply the law equally.
Okay, to Mr. McLennis.
Well, obviously, the first thing is a recap of what I just said earlier. The first step is to stop arresting and harassing people of color in our communities. The over-harassing, the over-arresting, the marijuana bust, the pre-contextual stops. But he also does something here in Pinellas County called the FIR, Field Interview Report. And his deputies have a quota to go out and do so many arrests, so many FIRs, and so many citations a day. He calls it a performance review. So these guys are out there looking, and what they do is they pick on the people that they think can't fight back, the minority community. And that's where that's got to stop. I will end field interview reports where they just literally pull up, stop, and start talking to people for no reason at all when no crime's been committed, just to see if they can find a reason to arrest them. That's what an FIR is. The second thing is I plan on putting a specific number of officers in a very tight area, a small little piece of the community, and there'll be 2 in the day, 2 in the nighttime. The community will have their cell phone numbers, not 911. And these officers are not going to be harassing people over minor infractions. They're not going to be arresting people for open container. They're going to be there to actually solve the crimes that that community has with real victims. And they're not going to have to go far because those people will be in the community. It's not going to be where they're all driving around with their windows rolled up, high darkened windows, and you don't know who they are. You're going to know their names and you're going to know who they are. Now, at the same time, I'm starting a website where you can go on and actually rate the officers like a Yelp review. So you'd be able to go onto my website at the Pinellas County Sheriff Department. If you had a bad interaction with an officer, you're going to be able to report that and explain what happened to you. And under the officer's name, he's going to have all of his reviews there. And it's going to make it very easy for the community to say, look, this guy's got 27 bad reviews. Why is he still an officer? And it'll also enable me to go into a community and say, okay, I see we're having a problem with this officer. This officer is gone. He's going to be retrained and put someplace else, or he's going to be terminated. And this will give the police and the community the right to have a say-so in who is in their area and how they're being policed. And hopefully, I hope that these people will get to know their officers will get to know them, and they'll start to trust them and actually just work on the criminal aspects that are plaguing these communities.
Thank you very much. And we will stick with you for the next question. This is from Faith in Florida. Oftentimes, jails serve as the first point of contact for people experiencing a mental health emergency. How will you prepare your deputies and coordinate with outside agencies to best help people experiencing a mental health crisis?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. One of the things I think is a major problem is we have too many police officers in really non-police officer positions. We have officers that are trained with weapons and all of that type of thing when they really don't serve that type of a service. I think that what we need to do with the police agencies, especially the Pinellas County Sheriff Department, is bring more civilians, more non-LEOs into the fold. Because when you teach police officers and train them, about 6-8 months of their training is on how to beat people, shoot people, and harm them. And the bottom line here is that doesn't work with a mental health crisis. So if you're trained to be a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And that's the problem with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. So I want to bring in not just 3 or 4, like Galtieri says. I want to have teams of these people that can go out there and unarmed deal with these people. And unless there is a situation where there's violence or something else going on, there won't be a gun at the scene. There won't be someone yelling and screaming and barking orders at somebody. There won't be the family member in a panic because they called for help and instead they're getting their loved one's butt kicked out on the street. So this is where it starts. It starts by not sending a hammer out that's going to look like everything is as a nail.
Thank you. Mr. Santana, the same mental health question to you.
I have to be in agreement with the things that were just said because they're the truth. Is if I have a pain and I go to a surgeon to get an opinion, I'm going to get surgery, And when you send a law enforcement officer that's trained to battle crime to any kind of a situation, they're going to go with the eyes of seeing the crime committed. It is essential that we bring in the rest of the community, all of the social workers, all of the resources that we have to be able to address these issues, and not just address them, but to correct them. Because the Sheriff's Department under my leadership will be there to serve and protect, and arresting people is not serving them. Resolving and guiding them and pointing them in the direction of being able to have a solution that actually leads to a better community, a more safe and secure community for all of us.
Thank you very much. We will stick with you for the next question. This is from Organized Florida. Will you deprioritize and slow eviction enforcement to give people facing eviction the best opportunity to keep their current homes or coordinate with community organizations to maintain dignity throughout the eviction process?
By the time an eviction notice arrives at the Sheriff's Department, we have a huge problem because we're about ready to have somebody be homeless, often with with children and a family. And so it is important. This is where the culture has to change. I don't want to be the instrument of evictions. I want to be the provider of solutions by bringing in all these social agencies, the religious organizations, those that want to help our people that are in trouble, show them and find a way for them to be able to resolve that way before it becomes an issue of eviction. We need somebody there that is not militaristic applying the law at the end, but we need somebody that really cares and wants to be of service to the community and provide the resources to make things better. And in making it better, we should make our community safer.
Thank you. Mr. McLennis?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that can be done that just are not being done at the sheriff's office. I watched a video from a couple of years ago where Sheriff Galtieri evicted hundreds of people from a hotel. And these people were thrown out on the streets. They didn't have any place to go. They were crying in the parking lot. And I've actually witnessed the sheriff's office evict other people, and they literally take all their possessions and they throw them out at the curb, damaging them, crushing them. And people start coming by and stealing all their possessions. People are going through some of the worst trauma that I've ever seen. And the reason that happens is because they get the court order, they go bang on the door, smash the door down, get out. And I don't think it needs to be handled that way. The court order doesn't say that these people have to be out by that day right now to get them out. They can go 3 days ahead of time with a non-LEO, someone that doesn't have a gun, and say, look, this is coming. Is there anything we can do to help you? We can try and tie them to community services a couple of days earlier. We can come back the next day and say, look, it's coming tomorrow. Is there anything we can do? Can we work something out here? Can we figure out a place to get you? Because tomorrow's the D-Day. So instead of just coming, banging on the door, throwing your stuff out on the curb that minute without that much of a warning, I would give them a 3-day notice. First day, please let us help you. Second day, what can we do to help you? Third day, I'm sorry, we don't have a choice. Not like Sheriff Galtieri, bash the door down on the first day and throw them out at the curb. Who gives a damn?
Before we get to our last question, and that will go first to you, Mr. McLennis, I want to invite you to put any questions you have. If you're in Zoom, put it in the Q&A. If you're on Facebook, drop it in the comments. This
Do I ever
question, yes?
Do I ever get to respond to any of Galtieri's nonsense? Because he had a whole hour where he got
Absolutely.
to
We're going to give you an, we'll do this question, and then we'll have an opportunity for either of you to respond to some of what Gualtieri said.
Thank you.
This is from the Dream Defenders. Recently, a sheriff deputy, his name is Deputy Doug Moore, was caught online saying, quote, "Most die at the hands of cops because they deserved it." Many people took offense to this statement. What is your response to that behavior? You heard that Sheriff Gualtieri has been sitting on it for 2.5 weeks. Should it disqualify a deputy from their role?
Are you asking me again?
Yes, you'll get to start with this one.
All right. Yeah, I listened really carefully to what he said. And as somebody who has filed numerous complaints with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, I know that they're immediately filed in the circular bin down by the side of the desk. He talked a big game about what they do when they get these complaints. And basically, I'm going to call bullcrap on him. He's a liar. And that's why he doesn't want to debate me, because I will call him out on it. I had a complaint that I made about my 12-year-old stepdaughter being sexually solicited in exchange for a tent and candy from Deputy Paul Martin. I gave him the complaint. I sent it to him personally. I gave him the text messages back and forth. He sent it over to Child Protective Investigations. And when I got the report back, it literally had 2 senior representatives from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department had gone over to Child Protective Investigations and instructed them to end the investigation and not to interview me, the reporter, or Martin, the suspect, and never discuss Martin as a deputy. That's what happens to these complaints. Now, what you saw Galtieri said, and I'm going to quote him, he said he hasn't decided to look into it formally. Now, I'm sorry, you look at the message, you see what the deputy said, what's there to look into? That deputy would have been terminated as soon as I confirmed that that message came from him. And so will every other deputy that speaks or acts that way in the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department when I'm in office.
Thank you. Mr. Santana?
It's disgusting. It's disgusting that we have that type of leadership that allows people to be able to voice it outward. It's important for us to have accountability and have transparency. And that starts from the very top. We can get rid of this individual, but unless we change that institutional culture and from the top, somebody that knows and has experienced these things and do not allow it to go forth. And every single individual that works for the Sheriff's Department and every other individual in this county knows that it will not be tolerated. That's when it changes. We're talking about an individual situation. That happens all the time. And it cannot be allowed, and it will change. Because as Eliseo Santana, Sheriff, would not allow that kind of behavior.
Thank you. We're going to give each of you a couple minutes. If there's anything that Sheriff Gualtieri said that you want to respond to, we'll give you the first chance to do that, Mr. Santana.
Well, I think he said it best when he said that the culture of the institution is what sets the tone. You can have policies, you can have processes in play, but unless you have the right attitude from the very top, there will be a wink type of a situation. You may have people follow the processes, but it's not in their heart. And especially if they know that they're not going to be held accountable. Transparency, accountability. I will not tolerate any kind of bias in that capacity. I have experienced it from within the organization and as a citizen, and I will not allow that to continue.
Thank you. After McLinnis gives his 2 minutes rebuttal to Gualtieri, we'll give an opportunity for you. If you have given questions, Jabbar is going to bring them to our candidates. Mr. McLinnis?
Well, the first thing I would like to address is Sheriff Gualtieri's cowardice in his refusal to debate me directly. And he is the one that actually forced you to have this separate debate where he gets to speak first and then it's Mr. Santana and I separately. He gets the whole hour and he gets to run his mouth without ever being confronted with the truth. And I'm going to start with his accusation that I put all these reprehensible things online. One of the things he said was that I posted a Photoshop of him pulling the hair of a black woman, which is true. I absolutely admit that. But the reason that I did that is I actually have a police report where Sheriff Galtieri did pull over a black woman because he got upset that she had cut him off at the traffic light. And he pulled her over and very violently tried to rip her out of the car. And he grabbed her by her hair and yanked on her hair so hard that her hair came out of her head in his hands. And he put that in his own police report. And I'm sorry that I wasn't there with a camera. And when I asked for his dash cam footage from that, they said it mysteriously disappeared. So unfortunately, I had to make a little Photoshop of it because I wanted people to see the image of what Sheriff Galtieri did. And my point with that image was that if the man who runs the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department doesn't have any problem grabbing a female, a woman by her hair and yanking her out of the car so hard he rips the hair out of her head, then what message does that send to all of the troops that are following him that were very well aware of what he did that day? What does that tell them they're allowed to do to these people? What right does it give them to act just like Sheriff did? And that's why I put that meme out there. And he wants to try and dismiss it as some kind of a prank or a joke. It's not. It's 1,000% serious. If anybody wants to see the copy of the police report, just message me on Facebook and I'll get him a copy of it. The other thing he said was the dash cam stuff. He said that, oh my God, it's going to cost $14 million. Well, his budget this year was $325 million. That's 4%. I'm sorry, but I think 4% is a good investment to make the people of Pinellas County feel safe and hold our deputies accountable. Especially when he paid $250,000 a day to have 300 deputies watching people on the beach so that they weren't 6 feet apart. And they parked a $350,000 military-style icebox for cold drinks for the deputies down there. The bottom line is he has tons of money. He just bought himself a $1.5 million airplane that he didn't come out of the budget, that he came out of thin air with. The newspaper asked him about it. He said he wasn't going to answer the questions about where the money came from. So the people of Pinellas are paying this money. The people of Pinellas want the body cameras, and it's not up to Sheriff Galtieri and people like him in the command staff to tell us no. I'm going to be a sheriff here in Pinellas County, and one of the first things I'm going to do is implement accountability and body cameras. And the problem with somebody like Sheriff Galtieri is he's never going to do any of these things, and you saw that in the statements that he made today.
Thank you very much. I am going to pass it off to Jabbar. I appreciate you answering these questions on behalf of all the organizations.
All right, thank you, Reverend. We will now move to questions from the community. Please enter your questions in the Q&A box if you're on Zoom, and if you're on Facebook, viewers, please drop your questions in the comments. The first question for both candidates: if the culture has to be trained, how will you deal with the PCS union? And we'll start with Mr. James first.
The PCSU.
Pinellas County Sheriff Union, I guess.
Oh, that's easy. I read over the sheriff's union contract with the local union here, and I'm really actually astounded that a sheriff would actually put pen to that paper and sign it. To give you an example of how ridiculous it is, one of the things it says is that if I fire a police officer as the sheriff, he has the right to arbitration, to argue with me and to have a hearing over it. And Sheriff Galtieri signed away the right to give the union the right to pick the arbitrator. So how is that supposed to hold anybody accountable? I can fire him all day long. The union's just going to pick their guy to be the arbitrator, and he's right back on the force, and there's nothing I can do about it. So as far as the union contracts, I can tell you right now, when the union comes walking into my office and their contract is up, they're going to be starkly surprised at what they face, because that pen is not going to be put to paper with half that crap that's on it.
Mr. Santana?
Wow. That's a really good question. And we have really good people working for the Sheriff's Department at all levels, and not just the law enforcement. And I believe in collective bargaining. I believe that we need to have that, and I'm going to be extending that over to our support personnel that are currently do not have that capacity, and if they do, it's very limited, because it's important for the workers to be able to address their employer and to have some protections. Now, having said that, we can address these issues systematically. This is good people coming to work. And when the community is aware of what issues are and what the controversies are between what I want done and the reason I want them done and why the union and I hate to say the union, why some people are against it. I think that the reasonable individuals will come forth and make that happen. I am a consensus. I bring consensus and I bring good people in there. I don't attack people thinking that they're going to have a bad thought and a bad opinion and bad actions. That's what we're accusing a lot of these individuals of doing. They're stopping the people in the community thinking that they're bad people that have bad actions before they commit anything. We need to stop this at the very top. We need to make sure that somebody there is reasonable. And I am that person, Santana, for sheriff.
Thank you.
May I respond to that a little bit?
We're gonna go to the next question. And we just gotta keep it moving because of the sake of time. In the next question, will you decriminalize sex work and build trust with sex workers to keep them and our community safe?
Which one's gonna answer that?
Mr. Santana, you can go first and we'll alternate.
Okay. Well, you know, that's something that we need to address at the state level. It is essential that the citizens not only vote in this election for a reasonable individual, one that is going to change the culture within the sheriff department to be able to be of service and to protect the community, but we also need to encourage them to also come out and vote to make sure that our state representatives address these issues at that level. And whatever, it is essential that we come out and vote and let our thoughts know and demand change at all levels.
Well, thank you.
Me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah, I have some firm beliefs on that. And my firm beliefs on that area are, again, the police industry, law enforcement really has no business being in the bedroom, anybody's bedroom for any reason. I personally feel that we're all grown-ups, we're all adults, and if two consenting adults want to do whatever they want to do, they're welcome to do that as long as they're not harming anybody. And that's exactly what sex work is, in my opinion. We actually have Pinellas County Sheriff's deputies that are given pocketfuls of money that go literally sit in strip clubs around this county and sit there and wait to see if they can see somebody touching somebody or somebody doing something. And that's really insane that we're paying deputies to tip strippers. And that's exactly what's going on. You have all these ridiculous stings that are set up because they want to catch one guy that wants to buy sex from another woman. Well, I'm sorry. That kind of exchange takes place all the time. We don't need to be arresting people for morality reasons. This is not the morality police. This is law enforcement. And law enforcement, in my view, means you have a victim that needs to be protected. You have a victim who's been a victim of a crime, and that person needs to be held accountable for that crime. We don't have victims when somebody smokes a joint on the beach. We don't have a victim when two people go off and have sex, regardless if they negotiated for it or not. And the bottom line here is, by running these people into the shadows and making them hide, making them feel like they're criminals, you're making them not avail themselves to services. You're making them hide in the shadows and not get the services that they need and perhaps go see doctors and make the money that they need to make. And I think we just need to leave that alone and focus really on crimes with victims. Here in Pinellas County, 80% of the crimes that are reported to Sheriff Galtieri go unsolved every single year. And the reason they go unsolved is because he's got deputies tracking down people for speeding tickets and changing lanes and not going to stop signs and sleeping behind churches and bothering people at the strip clubs. And the bottom line is we need to pull back the reins on the police department and refocus them on what they're supposed to be doing, which is literally to solve the crimes and help the people that are victims of those crimes. And that's what I'm going to do as sheriff.
All right, thank you. Next question, truly bringing about a change to our public safety architecture and justice system will require a combination with leaders outside the sheriff's office and the policing system. Do either of the candidates have existing relationships with key members of government, officials, judges, incumbent officials, police unions, or chiefs? And we'll start with you, Mr. McLennis. How can you say your name again so I can say?
It's McLennis. It's McLennis.
McLennis. All right. You go first, Mr. McLennis.
No, I don't have any relationships with a lot of those people, but I have investigated a lot of those people, and I personally have filed federal lawsuits against a lot of the judges here in Pinellas County. So I know who the dirty players are, and they're all part of the dirty system. So you're asking me to go in there and get in bed with people that I think have been victimizing the people of Pinellas County, like Bernie McCabe. One of the reasons we have the corruption that we have here in Pinellas County is because Bernie McCabe has been the state attorney for 30 years, and he's basically the head of the good old boy system here. And I'm going to make a prediction that when I win sheriff, Bernie McCabe is going to retire the day I am sworn in or the day I'm elected. The bottom line is, no, I am not going to be working with these people that have been victimizing the people of Pinellas County all these years. I'm hoping to bring in new blood that treats people fairly and stops turning the Pinellas County punishment machine into a huge money-making venture that victimizes the people of Pinellas like a cancer.
Ms. Santana?
You know, this is a good question because it goes down to changing the culture. And changing the way that we behave is not to bring in all of these individuals into the equation. I'm sure that the sheriff has that. It is to bring in the minister. It is to bring in the community leaders. It is to bring in every single individuals that identify themselves that was in that panel into the equation to be able to address and fully understand what is happening and give us some guidance as to what is happening and how we can resolve these issues. Going to these individuals that are, and you mentioned elected, that's just continuing that culture. Let's change it. Vote for Santana. Get me to be sheriff. We would change this situation completely and get the people involved in the solution, not controlling the people, but get them involved.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question, and we'll start back with you, Mr. Santana. There are many reasons why Sheriff Gualtieri is not fit for this position. But in your opinion, what is the two top reasons?
He doesn't see that there's a problem. Matter of fact, this organization full of very good people, right from the moment that they get out of the academy and they go to field training, they're guided as to what the processes are and the protocol. If somebody has a tail light that is off, that is broken, then they go in there and they, depending on your neighborhood, they go in there looking for some other crime. It's like an excuse to be able to go fishing. And when they approach that individual in that vehicle, they approach it with that apprehension. Keep your hands down. With your, and with their gun, with their hand in the gun, they're really apprehensive. And the result is that, I don't know about you, but when somebody approaches me that way, I get all nervous and I don't behave correctly. And it's that type of culture that we need to eliminate, because if it leads to crimes being committed, it leads to the people, the citizens that were supposed to serve and protect, saying, last time I got stopped, I went to jail for a tail light, because it's time to change that. It's time to bring about that change and use the power of the sheriff to make our community safer, not to enforce these laws in a way that is punitive.
All right, thank you, Mr. McLenish.
Are you sure I only get to say two?
Yeah, we'll just keep it to two because we got a bunch of more questions.
I'll try and stick with two. All right, the first reason and the most important reason, in my opinion, is that the sheriffs and the police officers here in Pinellas County, they swear a sheriff's oath. And the sheriff's oath says that they will uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States and the government of the United States and the state of Florida. That's their oath. You notice how it didn't say anything about protecting the people, looking out for the little guy, serving the public. What it basically said is they're going to defend the Constitution, which we already know Sheriff Gualtieri doesn't do, and he's going to defend the government. So basically all he really is a bodyguard for the existing unfair, unjust government, court systems, city council members, and everything else that's going on in this county. He's their bodyguard, and that's all he is. And the problem with him is he dropped the Constitution a long time ago. I watched a speech in 2012 when he was running for office. And he swore up and down, I'm going to uphold the Constitution. I'm going to be a constitutional sheriff. But you watched him arresting peaceful protesters for doing constitutionally protected activities. He's a lawyer and he violated his oath under the law under his bar license and went and had an ex parte communication with a judge to deny these people their bond. I personally, last week, filed a bar complaint against him for doing that. So the point that I'm trying to get at is when you have a sheriff that doesn't give a damn about the United States Constitution, then you have a public that isn't being served. And the Constitution is not a difficult thing. It's a very simple concept. Is what I'm about to do a violation of the Constitution, like holding people past their bond release because ICE says they want them to? Sheriff Galtieri, he accepts a $50 bribe to violate the Constitution, to hold these people past the time he's supposed to release them, to wait until ICE can get around here to get them. I'm sorry, if I'm bonded out and I paid my bond and you don't have any reason to hold me, I get to go home. If ICE didn't get here fast enough, that's their problem. We don't take $50 to violate the Constitution. We don't sell out the United States for a $50 bill. And Galtieri violates the Constitution every day. His officers violate the Constitution hundreds of times a day. And what we need is a constitutional officer, an officer that stands up for what the Constitution says, including Second Amendment rights, shall not be infringed. What about that is so hard to understand? But Galtieri will pull guns out on people that are legally carrying guns and almost kill them, like what happened to Philandro Castile. The bottom line is, if we don't have a sheriff that understands the Constitution, respects the Constitution, and makes a sworn oath to really actually follow the Constitution, then we have a lawless sheriff operating in a way that is a danger to the people here in Pinellas County. And I am a constitutional sheriff. I will be following that Constitution to a T, and there will be no violations in my office with deputies violating the Constitution either.
All right, we're coming down to the last few questions, so if we can make these answers brief. Do you support, and we'll start with you, Mr. McLennan, do you support defunding, demilitarizing Pinellas County Sheriff's Office and working with the community, with the county commission to create better community service programs now served by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office deputies who aren't trained to handle these jobs, such as social work, mental health? We kind of touched on it earlier. You can go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, if you go to my webpage, mclinnis4sheriff.com, on my platform page, I have exactly that. You talk about defunding and demilitarizing. Absolutely. I'm going to have a garage sale. We're going to be putting those tanks and all that military equipment on eBay. I'm going to sell Sheriff Galtieri's plane. I'm going to get rid of all that military equipment. And I'm also considering taking off all of the military names of the sergeants, lieutenants, and corporals. And maybe we should just have supervisors and managers and things like that and get rid of all this military mindset. Because when you have that military mindset, they're at war. When they're at war, we're the enemy. And that's got to stop. And you can't do that when you dress these people in that military gear and send them down Central Avenue chasing 17-year-old girls to throw them in handcuffs because they're trying to get to their car, like the video I watched the other day. So the bottom line here is we've got to stop this, and it will never stop with Sheriff Galtieri in office because he is part of the problem. He has come into this because what I call chain of command inbreeding, which means the people of Pinellas think that they had a choice for a sheriff, but they never have because all of the sheriffs were handpicked by the sheriff's agency and put in front of you. And you're told you can only vote for these people because they were in the sheriff's department. And that comes to an end with me. The bottom line is if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same result. And Einstein said that no problem can be solved from within the same consciousness that created it. And Galtieri is the problem, and he is the consciousness that created it, and I'm the solution.
Mr. Santana?
Can you please repeat the question? I was following the answer.
Okay. Do you support defunding, demilitarizing the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office?
Yes,
Community Commission. Okay.
Thank you. You know, the Sheriff Department is under my leadership is going to be there to serve, not to arrest. And I agree with everything that was just said. The militarization just leads into a them and us mentality, us being the law enforcement, and that's not the right approach. You can read a book about the experience of what it feels like to be stopped and to be questioned by a law enforcement officer, but unless you're one of us, unless you're Hispanic, unless you're Black, unless you know that fear that is there, the authority that is given to these individuals over us, unless you know that, and I know it, you're not going to be able to, you can set policies. I'm going to change that culture because it's essential that we bring in social workers to handle situations that have social problems. If you have a mental illness, we need to bring somebody to address that. If you have a car accident, we don't need to have a $125,000 vehicle tied up with an officer with a gun to write a report that they're poorly trained to do. We need specialists to write that report. And that is going to be a fiscal responsibility. We're going to lower the cost. We don't have to have a greater budget. We just have to spend the money in the right area. And our community will be safer. And we will serve and not arrest when it's Santana. You want change? You're looking at change.
Okay, great answers, gentlemen. We have 2 more questions and we only have 3 minutes, so let's go right into them. What is, we'll start with you, Mr. Santana. What is your position on school resource officers? Do you think they belong in schools, specific schools, or no schools at all?
Wow. You know, our sheriff was in a commission that actually recommended that we have veterans, we have teachers, we have citizens in good standing to be able to be armed and put into our schools. That's insanity. That's insanity. If we're going to have a law enforcement officer there, it cannot just be a law enforcement officer. We have to make sure that they're trained to be social workers, to be able to address these children, to be counselors for these children, and as a last resort, be able to use that armed weapon to protect them. But to have them there, if you have a back pain and you go to a surgeon, you're gonna get surgery. If you put a law enforcement officer in a school environment, he's gonna look for crime. We need to have somebody in there that is looking to help and resolve the problems long term, and also provide the security as a last resort, because I have 13 grandchildren, 10 of them are going to school, and I want them to come home safely every day.
Thank you. Mr. McGlinnis?
No, I'm not an advocate for school resource officers because I actually have seen them in action, brutalizing children and criminalizing children. I have 2 videos on my YouTube channel right now, McGlinnis for Sheriff on YouTube, that show Pinellas County deputies brutalizing a 15-year-old boy one time and a different 15-year-old boy another time. And I sit there every day when I go and drop her off at school, and I see those 3 Pinellas County Sheriff's resource officers' cars parked out in front of there, $70,000 a piece. And all they do is drive to the school, park it there, and drive it home. I don't know why we're paying for those officers' cars to be there. I'm going to take all the SRO cars away, and I'd like to take the SROs out of the schools because I think it absolutely contributes to the school-to-prison pipeline. And I think that Sheriff Galtieri is the leader of that because he's the one that pushed that law. He put on his Pinellas County Sheriff uniform, went to Tallahassee, and begged those legislators. He went on a blood and guts tour where he showed all the bodies and the blood from the Stoneman Douglas to all these other schools to try and get these officers into these schools in Pinellas County. So if there's any one person who is the face of the school to prison pipeline, it's Sheriff Galtieri, because he is directly responsible for putting all these cops in schools that are treating these kids like criminals. And my daughter actually videotaped one of the beatings that one of the kids took. It went on for 3.5 minutes while the kid was screaming. She also took a photograph of the Punisher logo on the butt of one of the Pinellas County Sheriff's guns that's walking down the hallway. And what message does that send to the people that are in these schools? That not that you're in a school in a safe environment, that you have somebody watching over your shoulder and just waiting for you to make a bad move. And I think that's got to stop. And I don't want my kids going to a school that looks more like a prison.
Okay, and this is the last question. And it's kind of loaded. So a lot of organizers are marching under the banner of defund police and arguing that trained social workers and EMTs would be more appropriate choices to handle many of the jobs police currently handle. What's your position on reallocating money for law enforcement? And we'll start with you, Mr. McLennan.
Well, here in Pinellas County, they have a policy where if someone calls 911 for a medical, they send the police too. Why? So they can get out with their guns and start bullying and bossing people around. I have 3 cases that I am aware of where the people that they called for help were brutalized and killed. I had a man just the other day whose son was out having a mental episode, and he was a cancer survivor. He weighs 90 pounds. He's 70 years old, and he was trying to tell the Pinellas County deputy not to brutalize his son. And so how did they respond? The Pinellas County deputy took a running tackle and slammed this 70-year-old frail man into the concrete. And he has bruises and cuts and damage all over his body. I'm actually going to be interviewing him and making a commercial about what he went through. And that is the problem. We're right back to the hammer and the nail thing. So defunding, absolutely. But I'm going to defund the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department by at least 25% without even asking the county commissioners. And I'm going to start by my own paycheck, cutting that 25% because I think that these people are overpaid all across the board. We've got deputies in the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department that have received over $1.3 million in compensation in less than 4 years. We've got 2 deputies named Dan Simovich and George Steffen that are collecting $255,000 a year out of the Pinellas County taxpayers' pockets. And this bloated waste of our money to criminalize us, to expand the Pinellas County punishment machine has got to end. And that all ends with me, James McGlinnis for sheriff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santana.
You know, I have to agree that this whole process starts at 911 when a citizen calls asking for some type of a help at 911. We need to have a better process of breaking that down. Is this a safety and security issue? Does this require an armed individual to intervene? Is this a crime being committed, or is this a call for help? And at that level, instead of what is the norm to send a law enforcement officer to handle these situations, we need to give them more options. And that requires me to be able to work as the sheriff with the county commissioners, with the city administrations, to be able to work this thing out, to be able to take it from the top. Let's not resolve this. Training the officer to be a social worker, to be a mental health counselor, it's not gonna work. We need to have 911 be able to direct the right resources where needed, and that's where the issue comes in.
Okay. And I want to open it up for. Thank y'all very much. Thank you everybody for the questions. I want to open it up for Ashley Green, Dream Defender Squad.
Wow, what a couple of hours! I'm in my feelings right now, so I'm gonna try and close this out as concisely as possible. Though people who know me know that concise is not a word that would describe me. You know, Reverend Andy said something earlier that really touched me around just this moment. And this is very evidently a moment where we are having to reconcile some of the darkest demons in this country, and that is systemic racism. And some people would call it colonialism, some people would call it imperialism. But what we know it as is as outright hatred that's gone unchecked too long. And I think we had a wide variety of perspectives tonight that shows a candidate that doesn't see any problem at all with what's currently happening, and 2 other candidates who are aiming to rise to the occasion and actually answer for the history, not just of this country, but of this community. We have open wounds today. We have open wounds from decades ago. We have open wounds from a century ago that we still have yet to reconcile. And I want to really invite people to not run away in fear of this process. And it's definitely a fearful and daunting one. But there can't be courage. There can't be bravery without fear. I want to implore people to be courageous. I want to implore people to be brave in tackling maybe one of the most critical moments of our life, and that's overturning systemic racism in Pinellas County. And we know that the sheriff's office is going to be a big part of that. There are so many ways for people to get involved after tonight. One of the most important ways is that you get registered to vote and that you apply to vote by mail. And why is that? One, this is somebody whose check you sign every time, regardless of whether or not you vote, money's coming out of your life. And I think at least I care about where my money goes in my check. I check my bank to where this money is going. in the hands of our elected officials and the people who make decisions about so many other people's employment. But it's also a pandemic, and we want you to be safe. And so when you register to vote, please make sure that you're registering to vote by mail. I'm going to read out the website, and I hope that someone is about to put it in the chat, but you can go to Register to Vote Florida. That is FOR, register to vote Florida.gov, and that'll allow you to register to vote online. Finally, so glad to be in collaboration with all the organizations who made tonight possible. But at the end of this week, we are going to be remembering, honoring, and celebrating a day called Juneteenth, which is a day that's supposed to be representative of freedom for African Americans across this country, for Black people across this country, colonized Africans across this country, whatever language you want to use. And in that vein, we have to acknowledge that freedom actually doesn't exist for our people yet. And it can't exist so long as we are not free from police violence, from brutality from the state, freedom from poverty, and freedom from, again, some of the most critical issues in our lifetime that our parents face, that our grandparents face, that their parents face, all the way back to our arrival on this continent. And so we're asking that people join Dream Defenders on the Saturday following Juneteenth at St. Petersburg City Hall for a rally demanding freedom from police violence. Again, that's this Saturday at 1 p.m. at City Hall for a rally demanding freedom from police violence. There will be grounding in some of the community's local demands towards what justice and peace look like. We'll also really be going into what does this mandate mean around defund the police? Dream Defenders has been carrying it for much longer than it's been sexy and popular. We have been called too radical for far too long. We want to share with you all why we understand fundamentally that police and prisons are violent institutions that are not designed to find peace or justice. And if we want peace and justice, then we need to start investing in some new solutions. I want to thank everybody again from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this conversation. And I look forward to your courage and bravery in continuing in the future. Good night.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to thank everyone for having me on tonight. It's been a real pleasure and a real honor. And there's a lot of work to move ahead and go and do. And I'll see you down there on Saturday.
I want to thank the opportunity to be able to present myself. I just decided to run for sheriff not too long ago. And this morning I had a conversation with my grandson. I have 13 grandchildren, but my grandson, he's 10 years old, and his outer skin, he's African-American looking. I was trying to, we were looking at the situation of abuse, and I was trying to explain to him that we have to behave differently, that we have to, when we're approached by law enforcement, we have to be careful. I will not allow my grandchildren to continue in this process again. And that's why I'm running, because I will change the culture and it will be eliminated institutionally. Santana, Sheriff. Thank you.